of us sort of come into this work in some way where we're now speaking about it and sharing our stories, but it really comes from a place of suffering and pain and darkness, like we all know. So when we can sort of build those connections with people, with women, or with any community of people that can actually receive that and get something from it, it's like the most rewarding thing in the world. And so it's kind of interesting because I just, like I was saying before we got started, I got off the phone with Dave from Dopey just like 20 minutes before I jumped on here. And it's so funny because we recorded an episode and we talked a lot about sort of how our relationship has grown and changed over the last couple years. And, you know, I think part of my story has been non-conventional or unconventional, I should say. And so that's been sort of a big piece as to what I speak about now, because I haven't really done recovery in the most traditional of ways. And so I sort of am grateful, I'm super grateful to be here to be able to share that, because I think people can identify with struggling in different ways and then trying to figure out ways to just put pieces together, however that may look, of just one foot in front of the other. And so my story really has taken that same kind of course. I started using pretty heavily back when I was about 20, 21. And I was working in the nightclubs, and I was a VIP bottle waitress, and everyone was doing coke, and it was like the thing to do. And it pretty quickly, probably within about a year, ended up progressing into opioids, Oxy 80s. And I talk about how these things sort of came into my life because most of the time they were actually, and I know you guys can probably identify with this, and when I talk to other women, I feel like this lands pretty well and people get it. But most of it came in the context of really toxic romantic relationships. And so doing the oxys started because I linked up with a guy, and he was selling them and he was giving them to me for free. And so it was just sort of like an endless amount that I didn't care to check. I didn't care to be like, okay, you know, I've been told how dangerous this is and I have addiction in my family, but I'm out here partying, I'm 20, you know, like who gives a crap? And that quickly turned into a super toxic, abusive relationship, but the drugs never stopped. And so I was sort of simultaneously being controlled by the drug, and then I was being controlled by him because he would use the drug to control me. He wouldn't answer his phone. He knew that I would be dope sick, that I would need to get to work the next day. And so it was this like whole runaround of the worst thing that I could ever have had happened to me, which is someone else and something else controlling me, which is exactly what the drug ended up doing, and everyone that was sort of involved in that lifestyle with me at the time. So that ended up sort of rolling into then eventual IV use, and the IV use starts because I leave this drug dealer, and I make a joke about this when I share this on my podcast or when I share it with other people. I'm like, you know, the best thing I ever did was actually like get rid of that drug dealer and find a new one. And so some people that like don't get it or haven't walked this life are like, what the hell are you talking about? But I'm like, no, seriously, like I had to cut ties with that part of my life and move on to another drug dealer, ironically, right? Now it's worse though, because now these folks end up introducing me to IV drug use, and the actual drug of choice was really never heroin. It was always the pills. And so my whole like predisposition was that I wanted to be functioning, and I wanted to have energy, and I wanted to get a million things done, and I didn't want to have to really show up for the world in the ways that caused me so much anxiety, because the social anxiety that I had since I was a little kid was so debilitating that it was painful for me to walk into a room. It was painful for me to raise my hand in a room or share anything, especially at a meeting. When I first started to get clean, and I'll get to that in a second, going to meetings, it was horrifying. So I end up getting stuck in the IV cycle, and this is now with somebody that I'm in a romantic relationship with again. Fast forward a little bit, I end up sort of I didn't really have like a serious rock bottom for me. I think the biggest and most scariest experience that I had, I actually shared it on Dopey when the first time I came on Dopey, and that was somebody essentially dying in my front seat, and then waking up when I like roll up to the front doors of the emergency room, which was crazy, and also sort of like a God moment of like, what the hell just happened? I kind of can't explain this in rational terms, and like maybe this is something for me to look at, because what I saw that day will never leave me, you know? Like I saw somebody turn completely blue, turn completely gray, and that image just rocked me. And so that's when I started to say like, okay, now this is starting to get serious, and do I really want to keep going this way? Now, I found out about Vivitrol. And for those that don't know sort of my family history, my dad's also in recovery. And he had a long battle with trying to do this on his own and using methadone off the street to taper himself down. And then got stuck in that cycle for, God, maybe 15 years, at least 10 years. And so the last thing I wanted to do was go on medication because I had seen what it had done to all the people that I knew. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not going to work. Although I did try Suboxone, I did do methadone sort of on my own, dosing myself. But eventually I just got to the point where I was like, I need something to save me from myself. I can't trust myself. No matter what intentions I have for the day, I'm waking up in the morning and the first thing I'm doing is calling the drug dealer. And there's no way that I can like break out of this cycle. And so what am I going to do? I need help here. And I need something to stop me from doing this. So I learned about the Vivitrol, ironically, from the first drug dealer, toxic boyfriend. And I'm like, all right, this sounds pretty decent. Like, no risk of withdrawal, no risk of physical dependence. I can come off of this whenever I want. And, like, I don't have to do this whole meeting thing. Like, I don't have to do this, right? Like, I can just show up and get this shot, and then I can just carry on with my life. Like, I don't actually have to be a drug addict anymore, right? Because at this time, I'm like, this whole part of my identity is fractured. I have the person I used to know, the person on drugs. We're not integrated yet. And the two parts of my psyche that I can't sort of resolve and bring together. So I ended up doing the Vivitrol, and I wasn't willing to go to meetings because, well, I shouldn't say that. I probably went to about 15, 20 to start and tried it, sat in the back of the room, didn't participate, and just was rocked with the anxiety the whole time that I sat there of like, oh my God, it's coming to me, it's coming to me, it's coming to me. I got to share, I got to do something. Panic mode. And this is like debilitating for me because I don't want to look like I'm struggling in front of people. So when I have my social anxiety friggin' bursts come up, it's very obvious. I lose my breath. My heart's racing out of my chest. I'm choking over my words. My face is twitching. My lips quivering. My eyes look crazy. I'm like, when I get anxious, it's not fun for me to like have to be like this and be this vulnerable in front of people. So meetings were like horrifying. And so I was like, all right, I'm not doing this. But I'll do therapy every week, like willingly, voluntarily, I'll do it. And that's how it started. So I started with the Vivitrol. Wasn't really taking it totally seriously the first year. Dabbling in and out every couple months I would use and be like, all right, I can do this. This is like, I can use normally, like we all know. And then that doesn't work. And so I finally had a conversation with myself, straight up. I said to myself, you have now tried Vivitrol for a year. You're still using. You still can't call yourself in recovery because of what you're hiding. Are you going to get real about this and actually fucking do something about it? Or are you going to accept that life? Because you have a choice. You can accept the life of a drug addict. That can be you. You can own it. You can rock it. You can live it. Or you can fucking get your shit together and give yourself a real chance and try to come back to the person that you used to know that has a lot of potential. So I was still trying to believe in myself, even though my confidence was rocked. My self-esteem was rocked. I basically had none, but I knew that I had the fight still. I knew that I had the attitude and the personality to like tell anyone to go fuck themselves if I really wanted to, including my addiction. So that's how it started. I started to get mad at the addiction, and that sort of built a little bit of fire in me to say like, all right, I can use this energy and I can move with this. And I started doing therapy every week. Now at this point, still not delving into trauma, which I find out later is like a huge piece to why I'm the way I am. And it's just talk therapy. But that started something. That started me to be able to start thinking differently, putting some pieces together, thinking about how I see myself in the world, how I want to see myself in the world. And so then I start sort of figuring a little bit more out about myself, realizing, okay, I'm worth something. I can actually do this. Now with the Vivitrol, once I got through that first month, I was like, okay, I just got 30 days and I didn't really have to do anything. All I did was get this shot. I knew I couldn't use opioids on it, and it took away the cravings, took away the thoughts. And then before I knew it, it was like another month. And then it was another month. And it was like, holy shit, I just got 3 months. Like, this has never happened. And I'm thinking about like, okay, well, now what do I do? Like, I guess I'm not a drug addict anymore. Like, I can actually do something normal with my life. And that was a safe place for me to be at that point. Saying that I wasn't a drug addict was what I kind of needed at that moment. And to use those words, like to say that, even though as a professional in the field now, I probably wouldn't use the word addict as regularly as I do when I talk about my own story. But those were sort of the jarring, extreme, provocative words that I needed to use with myself, because that's kind of like the only way that I get it. And so I started to explore ways in which I could put my time into something good. So a couple months into recovery, I'm already researching, okay, I want to go back to school. I want to learn something. So then I get into a master's program, counseling program, and that started a year into recovery. Now I do that program for 3 years, and it wasn't until the last class or the last day of the third year that I disclosed to my class, who are now professionals in the field with me, that I have this dirty secret that I've been hiding, that I'm actually in recovery. The reason why I know so much about this is because I kind of used myself as the research guinea pig here. This isn't actually clinical information. Everything I'm saying that I know about this is from family, friends, and my experiences. And I'm petrified to come out with that, because in my field, you don't really self-disclose. They do a lot of research on this, and they have a lot of opinions about it. And a lot of times it's perceived as you kind of working out your own shit on your clients, and that there's really no place for that. And so there was a lot of stigma and a lot of shame about just having that identity and having that be a part of my story in this field. But the reason why it all sort of came out was because I realized I was willing to look at how my life was changing for both the good and the bad. And when I say bad, I just mean the challenges that came up in recovery. And instead of being closed-minded about it and getting defensive about it, I decided to integrate that information and say, like, okay, maybe I got to take a deeper look at myself, because I put the drugs away. But as we all know, that's kind of just like where the work starts. And here I am now 3.5 years in, and getting feedback from one of my supervisors at my site that, like, I'm guarded and I don't take direction well, and she doesn't feel like she can help me, and I'm not going to her to ask questions. And I'm feeling like, well, yeah, that's because I'm not like a typical student like everybody else. Like, so now the ego is getting a little bit big, because it's like, all right, well, yeah, it's because I kind of know a little bit more than most of these students, so I don't need to go to you for everything. But she also wanted to feel helpful. So it was this battle between us. And long story short, it ended up being a pretty traumatic experience for me that reinforced a lot of the shame about my thoughts about coming out about my own story anyway. And it ended up sort of like, either it could have gone two ways. It could have sent me completely back into the hole, or I could have said, which is what I did, how do I take control back of this situation and guide this in a way that's actually going to help me? Because right now I'm feeling victimized. When I'm feeling victimized, it's not going to go well. And so how can I get myself to a place to sort of like take the power back? And so I said, she's right. I am guarded. I am hiding a secret, which is why she is perceiving me to be like closed off and not really sharing a whole lot, because she's right. It's just that she doesn't know the reason why. And so it was the last day of that training site that I said to her, you know, I'm in recovery, and you're right. I am guarded because I'm petrified, and I'm trying to do this work because I believe that there's a reason why I've been called to it, but I'm struggling a lot because this is something that I've never told anybody, and this is tough for me to say, and I don't want people to judge me. And I ended up crying with her, and she shed some tears, because turns out she had been in a long-term relationship with somebody who was in AA, and I had no idea. And so she thanked me for sharing, and we sort of were able to pull it back together and sort of like leave it on a good note. But it was really a moment that I had to sort of wake up and break through this. And I didn't have to get public with my story the way that I did. I sort of took it to the extreme. But I knew that any ounce of secret that I was willing to hold meant that I was fractured in here in some way still. And so my goal was, now let's put the pieces together and figure out how you can be the same person in every situation that you're in. This part of your story doesn't have to belong over here and stay over here. This part of your story doesn't have to belong over here and stay over here. You can be the same person in every situation, and you actually don't have to own the responsibility of other people's emotions and reactions and opinions of you, because it's not your business. You have a life here to live. You got to do it, and you got to get clear about what your intention is, about why you're sharing this, why you think it's helping you and other people, and then you have to own it. Whatever the response is, whatever people think about how you did this, I didn't go to meetings, okay? I didn't get a sponsor. I didn't work the steps. I went to school and I saw a therapist. Most people aren't doing it that way. And so I'm feeling like, all right, well, I didn't do it that other way, so maybe it's wrong, and I'm going to get a lot of criticism. And still I had to go forward because I listened to whatever was in here saying, you have to break free. You can't do anything in the closet, because that's when it gets dangerous. And that's when you're not living your truth. Even if it doesn't get dangerous, it doesn't feel good for me. And so that's where it started. And the way this ties into Dopey was the school that I had gone to. I'm still at, because now I'm in the doctoral program, training to be a clinical psychologist. So I went from the master's program onto the doctoral program at the same school. And that's when Chris and I connected, because Chris was a student at the school. And I had started the opioid crisis and advocacy student group, and Chris was the first person that joined this group. And then we connected. And it was just funny because Chris knew the way that I was talking was because I had this personal story. Like, nobody was talking in these meetings the way that anyone would have been talking if they hadn't had this personal experience. So we end up sort of like cracking the egg there. And he finds out that I'm in recovery. And then I start listening to Dopey, and we start connecting on that. And I was like, well, Chris, would you think I should do a podcast or something? Like, this sounds pretty cool. And I didn't realize it was like so simple to do. And truthfully, I actually have a lot to say, because I looked at myself like the kind of addict that got sucked up into this opioid epidemic that maybe typically wouldn't have fallen into that trap. And so now I'm starting to think, like, my sociological psychology mind is like, all right, what does this say, though, about the landscape of addiction and addiction treatment? We now have sort of this like new profile of an addict, so to speak, that maybe doesn't look the same, maybe doesn't respond to the same kind of treatment or the same kind of self-help groups in the same way, because I'm doing it successfully, so there's got to be something here, and I can't possibly be the only one, because I know way too many people that have ended up in this position the way I have. So that's when he said, he was like, dude, you got to start it, just do it. And so I did. And so I started the podcast with my dad, and that's been something that's been super healing. But it's really been about being clear about what my whole story has been. Because what ended up happening was when I got off of the Vivitrol, at that point, I was now in this 10-year, which, by the way, this 10-year toxic relationship with someone, with the same person that had introduced me to IV drug use, who was still actively using in my house for the 10 years that we were together. I'm 3.5 years clean on Vivitrol, staying on it for 3.5 years because he's in my house using, and I can't be safe around this, but I was determined, and I actually couldn't like get rid of him, truthfully, tried many times, and so now I was desperate. So he's in my house, he's using, I'm in the master's program, can't tell anyone that this is what's going on. Actually, and I even have the podcast at this point, and still can't tell anybody what's going on. So I get to the 3.5 year mark, and I decide now it's time to come off the Vivitrol, and that anxiety and that depression spiked so badly that it was like, I need to do something to address this. And I had always been sort of resistant to medications because I didn't want to be dependent on anything. I didn't want anything controlling me. I didn't want a group controlling me. I didn't want a medication controlling me. I didn't even want pills controlling me, which is why every time I used, the whole time throughout all those years, I hated myself. I hated the thing that I was doing. This was not fun. I didn't like this, but I was stuck. And I knew how much energy and effort it was going to take to get out of it. And I needed to be willing to put that fight in. And for so long, I wasn't. And so that's when the CBD came into play, because what happened was the anxiety and the depression got so bad. I was desperate, went to my doctor and was like, fine, you're saying Zoloft is it? Let's do it. Go on the Zoloft. Put on like 30 pounds in 2 months, mostly fluid. I was in physical pain like you wouldn't believe from the side effects of that. Ended up having a horrible back injury from how badly that medication pulled out the minerals and the nutrients from my bones and my muscles. Got so dehydrated that basically I like ripped the muscle in my back, my lower back. I still deal with the injury. And I'm like, all right, so can't do this. Now we're going to have to figure now we're going to have to get really serious because we're not doing meds. So now we really got to figure this out. So I start with the CBD oil. And I come off of the Zoloft, I come off of the propranolol, and I start with CBD. Now I'm realizing I can take CBD, and I can go to class, I can raise my hand, and I can speak. Then I test it with doing a presentation. And I'm like, all right, I got through the presentation with just CBD oil. And so now I'm starting to think like, and then I'm doing all this research on the CBD oil. Okay, like it's been known to it's shown to decrease or extinguish opioid cravings entirely. It's got all of these neuroprotectant factors. It's part of this plant called cannabis. Yeah, whatever. I never really smoked weed when I was younger or while using. So that idea didn't really scare me if I wanted to explore that option. And eventually I did. I did eventually start having a reaction where I was getting an allergic reaction to the CBD oil. And I was like, all right, well, now what? Because like now I'm just like continuing to run out of options. But the whole time I'm learning more about myself. I'm pushing myself further. I'm slowly starting to take away all the crutches. And I'm starting to really figure out who I am and what I'm capable of. And also just get more comfortable with the fact that I could be in a classroom giving a presentation, be nervous, look nervous, have everyone know I'm nervous, and I'm not going to die. No one's going to hate me. It's going to work out. It's going to be fine. So worst case scenario, everyone knows I'm nervous. Okay? So what? Everyone gets fucking nervous. Who cares? You know, like, you're not that special. So those were the types of conversations that I had to have with myself, because it was like serious wake-up moments of like, you're going to be all right. And I remember I started doing the research on cannabis as the whole plant. Okay, so now I'm doing all of this research on full spectrum, blah, 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 how the whole plant does something different than just the oil. Still struggling with some thoughts of using, even though I didn't entertain it. I didn't let it go too far, but still was there and still was a risk. And I still had this person in my life that was actively using, and now I don't have the safety net of the Vivitrol. So then I started looking into the plant, and I started smoking cannabis at night, a couple puffs to go to sleep, because the insomnia had gotten so bad. But think about it now, because now I get a public platform, pro-recovery, helping everybody figure out whatever fucking avenue you got to take. I do not care. Get pieces together and move forward. Commit to something and make it work. But not everyone's receptive to that. People think recovery and being sober means full abstinence, going to AA, finding a sponsor, working the steps, committing your life to that regiment. And that wasn't me. So now I'm feeling like a fraud, because now I'm using CBD oil. Now I'm smoking weed. I'm in recovery from opioids, in school to be a doctor. If we look at the evidence, we can say, like, all right, she's doing pretty good. But this model of you're not really in recovery was still sitting with me. And how do I come out about that? And how do I do it with confidence so then people can really see that I'm being genuine when I say this? It just completely changed my life and changed my perspective on things, and has allowed me to sort of see things differently. And it was painful. It was like a while before I was able to come out with that. And I had a lot of people reject me when they found out. And I said, you know what? If we're going to do this, let's do it. So then I create this Canna Chronicles series on my podcast. I decide that and I interview people who have come off of opioids with cannabis. And I want to start learning about how they're living their life, how they identify. Do they say sober? Do they say in recovery? Do they say recovered? Do they say they have a disease? Do they believe in cross addiction, or do they think it's a myth? Is one drug a drug all the way around? I don't know. So I start talking to people, and then I start finding that there's actually a whole community of people out here that actually have the same story as me. I just had been looking in the wrong place. And so that's when I started to say, okay, I can start relaxing about this a little bit more. And finally just came out, actually just probably last 6 months maybe, came out again with another piece of the story, being that cannabis has played this role in my life to sort of get rid of these thoughts of using, long into recovery, protecting myself coming off of the Vivitrol, so almost like a step down from the Vivitrol. And then I did an interview recently with somebody where I talked about cannabis and spirituality and what that looks like, and how my spiritual practice has changed, which I think has been influenced by the cannabis. I can't say entirely, because truthfully my goal is to totally extinguish the cannabis entirely and then go like super deep into my meditative yoga practice. That is like what I work now mostly. But yeah, it was tough. It was tough trying to figure out that path. And it was really hard to continue to believe that I just had to listen to myself, and I just had to look at how I was engaging in life. I wasn't lying. I wasn't stealing. I wasn't committing crimes. And not only was I just not doing that, I was there for people. I was opening my heart compassionately to other people that were struggling. I was lending my time to sit there with my clients who were in immense pain, that would talk to me about their substance use. And I wouldn't lead with my own story, but it does come up. And when it comes up, it's the most powerful tool in the room, because there are people who are there looking at me as a psychologist saying, you don't fucking get it. You haven't walked my shoes. You don't know. And it's like, I kind of do know. And then they're like, wait a second. And then it's a game changer, because all of that time that would have taken for us to build a rapport, for them to trust me, we don't have to do that now. They know I get it. So now we start with the real work. And that is what I had to remember time and time again from the people that I speak to, and how this resonates with people. It's not about the critics. It's about who it's helping. And so my message to everyone is like, you just gotta look at your own evidence. What is working for you, and are you happy with it? Do you feel like your quality of life has improved? Do you feel like you're putting one foot in front of the other? And do you feel proud? Because if the answer is yes, then fuck everybody else. Because everyone else has their own perspective on how life is supposed to go, but they're not in your head, and they're not walking in your shoes. They don't get it. They don't know what work looks like for you every single day when up here you're trying to figure all this stuff out. And every moment of every day, your anxiety pops up and you have to check it. And every time you have a conversation with people and you feel like they might be, upset with you or mad at you, you have to check that because your own insecurities will rock you. And that's what it's like being in my head. No one else knows that. No one else sees that. So it's like, well, I got to do what's going to keep me safe. And props to you for figuring out your path. But we can't sort of project our own ideals and morals onto each other. We should just got to let each other walk our own path. And for me, that's the beauty in all of this is that I had no idea what I was doing when I started to share my story with other people. But what I knew was that I was willing to take the chance and see where this was going to go. And magically, Gabor Mate says it all the time. He's sort of like my go-to guy. He says our mind constructs our world. Maybe our world originally constructed our mind, but right now, our mind constructs our world. So if I believe it's possible, if I believe that there's a community out there or a tribe out there for me, and I'm going to find it, if I truly share my authentic self, then it'll happen. If I believe that I'm helping people and step into that and genuinely move with pure intentions, when I go down to Mass Ave in Boston on Mass Ave, where they have cages right now set up for the people that are homeless down there, and I was down there on Saturday, and I'm working with the people down there, handing out all kinds of items, and they're all bandaged up. Some just overdose coming out of the emergency room. Other people, open wounds all over themselves, struggling immensely. And they are so grateful for us to just come down there and treat them like human beings. So at the end of the day, I think we can all have our opinions about what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to do it, what it's supposed to look like. But at the end of the day, the only thing we have is one universal language, and that's love and compassion. If we can show people humanity and dignity and respect, and appreciate that their subjective experience just looks a little different from ours, and that's based on the life that they've led and the things that they've seen, then so be it. And everyone's doing their thing. If everyone's moving forward and figuring it out, and maybe we fuck up along the way, so be it. But you know what? If we can all be there for each other and recognize that we're not alone in this, and we're all just trying to do the best that we can, maybe we can forgive ourselves a little bit. We can forgive other people a little bit. No one's perfect. Then I think that's really the take-home message. And so, fortunately, all of that has come to me through trials and tribulations and challenges, and I'm just grateful that I was so naive enough or stupid enough or crazy enough to just come out here and say, I don't even know how this is going to land, but this is me. Take it or leave it. And so much of that was sort of my own internal anxiety of, worrying about what people actually thought about me when really they really didn't think that badly of me. So only coming out and getting public actually helped me build the evidence to check all of these internal traps, these mind traps that we fall into. And so I just empower all of you guys to find the people that I would say are part of your tribe. And I'm so grateful to speak to you guys today, especially a group of women. I'm recognizing now as I move forward in my recovery how important grouping with other women has been. And I just think it's such a beautiful community that you guys have created here. And the fact that it's been born out of Dopey just is amazing to me. So, Erin, I thank you so much. As I get choked up here, remembering Chris, you guys are awesome. Thank you very much for asking me to speak. And good luck to all of you guys. What you're doing right now.